They slept that night in an inn, not far from where Osrith reckoned Bilig to have his own inn, before setting off to Seistra as dawn broke. The moment with the Gwynedians had been on her mind and, as they passed through the northern gate of the city and onto the Roman road that led them first to Tewkesbury, then Worcester, Saltwick, Worm and then Seistra, the ludicrosity of the situation began to sink into Osrith. She could not rule a kingdom, even if there was one to rule, which there wasn't. She was the Lady of Berwick, and she was relied upon to manage the farmland with the help of Caldegar and Mund and Bean, and the Alba warriors, when they were not training the Berwick household guard. I have to admit, I did not think you would take it so well, Bishop Oswald said, as they left the cathedral at the back. Well rested and fed, they got back onto their horses and left past the bishop's palace and onto the old Roman road that would lead them north, the direction they had come. Well, Osrith told him, I have effectively become the figurehead for a rebellion. She watched as her nephew turned to look at her, and smiled. But there can never be a rebellion. There is no land to take, no land to rule. The Old North belongs to Strathclyde, Cumbraland and Northumbria now. Is that why you said it? Bishop Oswald asked, his voice accusatory. He also looked a little disappointed. If there was any land to lead them to, I would, Osrith told him. I would leave Berwick and be their queen. But I cannot see where that land is, can you? Her nephew did not answer. So, I can be queen in my mother's name for them, queen in spirit, to give them the culture they need. But Osrith's view of what Bishop Oswald meant was about to change, as he reminded her that the land documents were, of course, real to the Cymric and the Gaels. The Norse might well honour them, as long as they could gain Ofoik, or Jorvik as they called it. But, as far as Osrith could see, it was right in between southern Northumbria, where Ofoik lay, and the North Sea, where the Norse patrolled, moving about their lands. It would be too tempting not to try to take it. It was about to change, for, when they got to Seistra, and to Bishop Oswald's own cathedral, our letter was pushed into his hand by one of the guards at the gate before they had even alighted from their horses. Norse have fled Alba, he told her, reading a letter as he walked down the galleries towards the back of the cathedral. Oswald looked at Osrith, Guthfrith, Anlaf, Edra with them. Edra? Osrith asked, concerned, following her nephew. Fled Alba? Taken by Constantine to a land of yours. A land of mine, Osrith thought. Berwick? Constantine had taken Edra to be with and left to her at the farm. What would he say when he found she was not there? Berwick? No, Osrith. A voice came, and she looked up. Next to Bishop Oswald, at the door of her nephew's office, was Eswi, Constantine's spymaster and her longtime friend. Not your Berwick lands, your northern Cymric lands. And when she looked at Eswi, and then at Oswald, saying nothing, Eswi clarified, Mun, Elan Vanin. Mun, Osrith thought. The island off the western shore of Northumbria. Aethelstan's lands, or so he claimed. Mun, inhabited by the Norse. Of course, they were going to Anlaf's stronghold, and her darling daughter, Thyra Anbika's child, was to be wed, Constantine with her. You have come to take me to my daughter's wedding? Osrith said to Eswi, hopefully. Your nephew cannot very well, seeing as he is one of Aethelstan's bishops and advisers, Bishop Oswald told her, speaking to her in the third person, and breaking the tension. She looked at Eswi, and nodded to Oswald. Before we leave, then, she said to her friend, I need 5 minutes with my nephew. 88,888,888. Bishop Oswald took Osrith into the back rooms of the cathedral, closing the door behind her. Before she could ask anything, her nephew said, you know what you are doing with the Gwynedians? No, Osrith replied. But there is little for them to claim. I am, or rather, Queen Gwythelth is a queen of nothing. She glanced at the door. Could you not come? Meet Constantine, Edra? My family? But her nephew shook his head. Go, Osrith, and when we next meet, tell me what Man is like. I have heard it is like Alba. You should come to Alba, Osrith told him, her voice dropping in amplitude. "I am sure your niece and nephew would be pleased to see you." "My niece and nephew?" Oswald repeated. Osric glanced to the door to make sure it was closed. Then, she told him how they had survived the plague of 3 years before, and had been rescued, ere they fell into the hands of Guthfrith. Though he was Sigtrygg's brother, he would see the boy and the girl as rivals for the throne which he believed was his by right. "They are safe and happy at Dunnottar," Osric told him. Elasade speaks Norse, as well as English, and Gaelish and Pictish. "Of course, they will be well looked after." And Osric jumped when her nephew stepped to her and closed his hands around hers. "God willed it that my niece and nephew did not die," he exclaimed. "And they are safe, and being brought up as Christian." His last statement was more a question than a fact, and Osric nodded. "Not the Roman Church, but the Irish Church," she told him. But Oswald did not react, other than to smile and nod in agreement. "Then I surely will visit Alba," he told Osric, "to see my kin, all of my kin." And he drew his aunt close. "You should stay here in my room, aunt, for the day has been long, and you could leave in the morning." But Osric shook her head. "My thanks, Oswald," she said to her nephew. "If Eswi has been searching for me because of Edra, then I must got with him." A pause followed, and then Bishop Oswald walked towards the door and, holding it open, stepped through it with Osric and walking with her back to his office, where Eswi still waited. Fed a sword had been above the door frame, Osric noticed. As they left Oswald's chambers, he did not forget his family. "Then the Norse will prevent him from coming anywhere near me," Eswi told Osric when she once again asked Bishop Oswald to accompany them, so she sadly said goodbye to her nephew and followed her friend to the riverside where several ships were tied to posts along its bank. Eswi helped her into it and, as they casted off, and headed back out onto the Dee, which would become the Merse, and then the Sea of Irion, she crossed to the back of the boat and watched as Eswi directed the boat back to the city which Ethelfled had refortified. Bear-making worked, Seaster, and many other towns saw that. But what then? What when Bers could no longer be attacked? Would there be a stalemate? A standoff? Would larger and larger armies need to be involved? Would factions become larger until the small details that set region from region apart were lost and societies eaten up into larger countries? It was what was happening with Mercia, Wessex and East Anglia. At what point would the people of Mercia begin to stop thinking of themselves as Mercian, but as Englandish, out into the wide Irish Sea? And Osric remembered why she didn't like to sail. A wind was whipping around the little craft, which was being sailed by 3 Norse and 3 Alba warriors. Whether Gaels or Picts, Osric could not tell. The midday was calm, but the waves were rough, and she felt seasick, very seasick. She sat at the back of the ship, and looked intently at the planks. It had been a trick Taggart had told her of, which meant that the choppiness of the seas did not affect her as much. After a while, Eswi sat next to her. "I did not expect you to be with your nephew," he told her. "But I did expect you to meet the North Cymric. Sindlin has been trying to get to Berwick many times to see you, but has been held back from crossing into Mercia by Aethelstan's men." Clearly he found a way. "Yes," Osric agreed, and said, as she had said to Bishop Oswald, "To what end, I do not know. The land cannot be mine, for it is Northumbrian and Cumbraland and Strathclyde, and I do not propose to fight Aethelstan, nor my brother, nor Owain, nor Constantine for the rights to any of it." But she opened her eyes wider when she saw Eswi smile. "What?" Osric asked. "Nothing," Eswi told her. "Except that, were you to do so, 3 of those 4 people would merely stand aside and allow you to have it." "But that would leave Aethelstan," Osric told him, "or Uhtred, who has just let Aethelstan claim Bibbenberg as a matter of course." "He has put up no resistance," she added, when Eswi's face did not change. "What?" she repeated, when Eswi said nothing. "What am I missing? What are you not telling me?" "Nothing, Osric," he replied. "As you said, you cannot act on becoming their queen." "What's man like?" Osric asked Eswi, as the boat sailed further north. "Is it green, like Cumbraland?" "I do not know," Eswi replied. "We have always avoided the place, sailed round it. This is the first time a king of Alba has ever visited there. Of course, Osrith thought, a little cynically, when Eswi went over to one of the warriors and pointed in the direction where the boat was going, because, until Domnall, there had never been a king of all Alba. Aethelstan, had he not a mind to subdue Alba under a kingdom called Britannia, might well garner advice from Constantine as to how to keep disparate groups of peoples together in one kingdom. But, Eswi had a point. A Gaelish kingdom had sprouted from a Cymric one at Man, Elenvanin, it had been called. But the Norse had claimed the land nearly a century before and had established rule there, their genocidal tactics leaving a land which once farmed and prayed to the Brittonic gods and transformed it into wholly Norse settlements, with not even a Briton remaining on the island, even to manage it. It was a fortress as well as a settlement, and Osrith could see, from the striped sailed, animal-leaded ships before them, it defended its borders fiercely. As they drew nearer, 2 boats were dispatched, their captains calling up the boat in which Osrith was travelling. The 3 Norse spoke back, and Eswi signalled down to them. Clearly the boats who had approached them knew the Norse in her boat and they flanked it, until they got to an inlet, a shallow harbour of yellow sand and pale green seagrass. Night was drawing in, and Eswi helped Osrith out of the boat. Her legs were quaking and she was indeed tired, but her senses were alert to the torches that had welcomed them to the harbour. Before them, in the growing dusklight, a fortress stood, 2-storied and again, guarded as they walked the short distance from the beach. This is Tynwald, Eswi told her, Anluf's fortress. The Norse use the land as a stopping-off point between Irian and Northumbria, and when they sail down from the Western Isles. And it indeed seemed a place for warriors to congregate. If it was indeed Anluf's fortress, did she want Edra living there? Where is she? Edra? Osrith asked urgently of Eswi. Is she here? Eswi stopped and turned to her, switching to Cymric for some reason, because the Norse understood Gaelish. Perhaps she is, Eswi told her. She has come with Constantine, and with his consent. Elasate caught her trying to flee Dunnottar and brought her to see the king. He summoned Anluf, as well. But Constantine told Edra that she could not marry unless Anluf sought permission from you, as her mother. I had tried to find you, he added, and then Constantine told me to search in Mercia, and that he was going to accompany Anluf and Guthfrith to Monday. They are his allies, Osrith exclaimed, in Cymric. I knew they were. And she strode to the door of Tynwald, expecting it to be open to her. And you are? Scoffed the Norseman on guard duty. A pathetic little old woman in leather pretending to be a warrior. I'd watch it, warned one of the Norse who had sailed the boat from Seaster. This is the Krejikvind, of whom the legends speak. Legends? Wondered Osrith. But she kept her face ferocious and began to draw away. One of the Norse made a move, but Osrith was quicker, and instead pulled tagged Seeks, and within seconds, she had strong-armed the man and was holding the blade to his neck. One move, and you are dead, she told the Norseman in his own tongue. I am Krejikvind, Erik Thurgilson told me so. And she enjoyed watching the fear fill his eyes, beginning to wave his arms in protest. She glanced to the second guard, a little old woman in leather pretending to be a warrior. She parroted back to him. He also had fallen silent, and Osrith glanced to Eswi. That was what he called me, did he not, Eswi? A pathetic little old woman, Eswi emphasized, but then stopped, and Osrith loosened her grip of the Norse guard briefly when a great peal of laughter came from behind the doors, which were flung open. A tall, barrel-chested Norse warrior stalked out of the fortress, and laughed at Eswi again. Krejikvind, he exclaimed. I have heard it. But Osrith was not about to release the guard in a hurry. She eyed the man suspiciously. I am Guthfrith, your king's ally. The man introduced himself, and as Osrith stared at him, he did seem to share the features of Sigtryg. I am pleased to meet the woman who has killed so many of my kin. As did your grandfather, in his time, Osrith told Guthfrith. Northumbria, Mercia, East Anglia, even Wessex. Nearly. Wessex, yes, nearly, he repeated. And I had the pleasure of killing one of Ivar's guards while King Domnall ended your grandfather's life, Osrith continued, recalling a similar conversation she had had with Anlaf once. It was not bragging, nor was it bitterness. The Norse seemed to navigate their relationships battle-wise. "But we are allies now," Guthfrith exclaimed heartily. "Your king is the ally of my king." "Your king?" Osrith asked. "But I thought you were the king of Ofoik, of Jorvik." Guthfrith looked at her with beady eyes for a moment, and then smiled. "Come, come," Guthfrith encouraged, waving his hand in the direction of the open gates. "We do not need to discuss this on the doorstep." And Osrith followed him inside the well-built hall, two-storied, with many antechambers and galleries and passages. Clearly the man who lived here, Anlaf, could command a good deal of honor through his fortress, and Osrith was not surprised to see a channel a little way off which seemed to be adapted from the strand line where a Norse ship might be brought inside the fortress, its keel still wet. "Alas," continued Guthfrith, as he led the way along a passage that was taking them away from the gates, "even with King Constantine's help, I could not hold Ofoik." "No, I talk about the King of Man, Anlaf Guthfrithson." "Your son?" Osrith asked, but Guthfrith laughed, and waved a hand of dismissal. "No, indeed," he told Osrith, "there are many Guthfriths. In fact I was named after his father, a cousin to my mother," he added. And so, Osrith thought, as the inner hall door opened, they were here to see the King of Monday. 88,888,888. Anlaf was as Osrith remembered. He was sitting on a chair near the back of his hall, food spread before him. When he saw that he had company, he got up immediately and strode over to the door where Eswi and Osrith were standing. Anlaf broke into a big smile. "Come in, come in." He beckoned, and the doors closed behind them. "It would seem that King Constantine's man has found you, at last." "At last, Lord King?" Osrith asked, and bowed at the neck. But Anlaf waved away her gesture and beckoned them further in. "Have you eaten?" "Of course you wouldn't have," he added. "Let me give you meat, and bread." "And ale too?" He blinked for a minute, but before Osrith could say anything, he turned to one of the guards by his throne and added, "Bring boiled water for the Lady Osrith." Then he turned back to look at her, gesturing towards the table. "The Lady Eswi has told me you do not drink ale," he added, and took some steps to the bench at the back of the hall. "Please do, eat," he repeated, looking between the food and Osrith, his words running into one another in their haste. He seemed excited and nervous. "Edra, she is here?" Osrith asked, getting to the point immediately. "Yes, she is here, and unharmed, and untouched," Anlaf added, gesturing to Guthfrith to close the door. "You may have heard she fled Alba," he added. "It was unfortunate." "Unfortunate?" Osrith asked, not giving the man an inch. "What was unfortunate?" "That I left Dunnottar earlier than I expected to." Constantine's man, and here Anlaf nodded to Eswi, had gone to you farm at Berwick to bring you to Alba, but could not find you. I heard of trouble in the west, and, unfortunately, did not choose my words carefully when I spoke to Edra about this. The she was, Anlaf added, his words still full of nervous energy, expecting you to come to Dunnottar for her wedding, and you could not be found. I left word, Osrith replied, coolly. My men knew where I was, or I would not have been discovered and brought to Ellen Vannin. Yes, of course, the land, Anlaf added, again still nervously talking to her, and glancing every so often to Eswi. Your Lord King is here, Anlaf added, nodding to him. And there has been a tentative proposal of marriage. I have already received gifts from Constantine. But, he looked back to Osrith, it is her mother's approval, and dowry which I seek. Getting to the point, Osrith told him, and wondered what gifts Anlaf had been given by Constantine. Before you speak, Guthfrith interrupted, I would ask the Lady of Berwick a more pressing question. More pressing than my marriage negotiations? Anlaf asked, snapping back. Guthfrith fell silent, glancing to Osrith, and she turned to the ex-king of Northumbria, looking back to Anlaf for a second before addressing the man. You are asking for support, Osrith told him, like when you came to Berwick, she added, and felt a rush of exhilaration to discover that Eswi did not know about Guthfrith's visit. I cannot authorize Alba men, and the Bernicians support my lands, she told him. But Guthfrith was striding down towards her, angrily. Both Eswy and Anlaf stepped in front of him. The King of Men turned to Osrith. Do you think that not supporting the independence of Eothric means that Ethelistan will leave you alone? He wants the whole country, Alba too. Anlaf's words so true. And yet, she could never act faithlessly towards the families who had depended on Saenid's support and love, and that of his family through countless generations. Osrith swallowed down a pang of guilt. I cannot support you, Guthfrith, Osrith said again. And if it is that you have come to me and not my brother, I am guessing Uhtred has said no. Guthfrith shifted, almost imperceptibly, but he said nothing. Then, she turned to her future son-in-law, knowing then exactly what he should receive for Edra's dowry. Anlaf, I know that you killed the Gales, some of them were my dear friends. But, it is war. Constantine will support you, if you go north, and you have my blessing, such as it is, and if Edra still wishes to marry you. She is not a young child any longer, she is 28, but it was Anlaf, this time, who was bearing down on Osrith. I love her. Anlaf blurted out in Norse, I love her from the top of her sun-drenched head all the way down. He broke off, as if his effusive description was too much even for himself. She is ... I would never. I know you would not, Osrith replied, impatiently. Nor would Constantine. And she felt her voice soften. I am only sorry that I will not be there to see her in her finest. Give her this, she continued. It was a piece of amber. It once belonged to her mother Thyra that she wore when she married her father, Bicca. Osrith never knew why she had taken it with her from Dunnottar to Berwick, only that seeing it reminded her of her daughter, and the right she had done going to the Britain healer, though it was against the law. She held it out to Anlaf, who took the jewel and wrapped it in a leather cloth, putting it in his clothing as carefully as if he were wrapping a hen's egg. And that was when she saw Edra. She had been standing at the back of the hall, and was watching now as Osrith looked back to her. Anlaf, too, had seen her, and had crossed the wooden floor to her, and they spoke in Norse. Osrith then that it was what Constantine had planned for the daughter he had adopted, and spoiled, all along. The stallion is in the stable, Anlaf told Osrith as Edra stood beside her and tended. And the golden dish will hold our wedding drink. But there was more. Osrith withdrew from her waist a purse with her that she had brought. She had been prepared in case she had been forced into a situation where she had had to pay tribute to Constantine, and he hastened to Anlaf and pressed the silver into his hand. I earned this, Osrith told Anlaf. It is her dowry. Part of her dowry. For what better gift could she give Edra than pass on from mother to daughter the northern Brittonic lands to her? I want to make her queen of Eothric, reclaim my family's lands. Anlaf went on. Osrith saw Edra beam at him and she did not point out that the land had been Anglish before that, and of the Britons before that. But then, of course, she would be restoring it through the Brehon laws back to a Brittonic line, through Bicca, whose family had been borderland Pictish. He had been left on the monastery steps, however, and was Saxon in all other ways. Edra, she told her, and her daughter came to her. Edra, Anlaf, she said to them both, not caring whether Eswy heard, for he would tell Constantine anyway. And Osrith told them everything, from her mother giving them to her mother being Gwyddulf of the Hen Ogledd, who had married Uhtred, her father, and had had her, before being forced into marriage to Elfric. She told them of the land, of Men, and that the mainland for her began just south of Glashku, but had a more definite border with Northumbria at Amont Bridge. Anlaf could now claim, through his soon-to-be wife, that he had deeds to the land at Ofoic. The Norse could ride unimpeded through Cumbraland, as far as Alba and Strathclyde were concerned. But, most importantly, it sealed the bond of fellowship between the Norse and Alba. Whatever Constantine chose to do, when it came to it, against Ethelistan, the Norse and Alba would be united, indeed, in blood, and in land. For it was the only way that Osrith could go back to face Finan. 88,888,888. Edra would marry that evening. It had all been arranged, and so, ostensibly, All the things that would make for an Alba wedding had been brought by Constantine. It had been once said of Alfred that, the bastard thinks, whoever had said that surely would have applied to the king of Alba, too. Because there was someone else, someone wilier, who had planned for this, even to where Osrith had been and what she would do now. He may even have set up the northern Cymric, Owain's kin, in order to oppose Hywel. How ideally placed you are, Constantine asked, when the doors were shut and it was just the two of them. You have the documents claiming the land, you have the blood of the Henogled, you are married to a Gael, have a Gaelish son, you married a Pitlander and gained Gododine. Gododine? It wasn't a question. She knew full well what Constantine meant, and what he was implying. That Berwick was not in Bernicia, a place named by the incoming Saxons, but that Berwick was in the Pictish land of Gododine, Urien's land. Which meant that, if she were to say so, she could claim the land from Lindisfarne to Urien's northern sea, the land south of Alba and Strathclyde and north of the Wall. But they were Eddras now, and so she asked, do you imagine me a queen then, a queen of the Henogled? I imagine you as you have made yourself, Constantine told her. Do the Sire not speak to you? And they did. For she could see it all now, Urien's blood claiming her ancient lands, her father's Saxon blood giving her the land to Ofoic, including Durham, including Cattraeth, the Battle of Taliesin's poem, how the Cymric, having lost Urien to treachery, lost their leader before the battle had even begun, and the land was won by the Saxons. If she were to claim it, she would be openly declaring war on Uthed, on Aethelstan. These men wanted war. They wanted a fight, and to fight under a leader. But even if the Norse stood by them, and at that moment, marrying Edra to Anlaf helped that premise, she would be betraying. Betraying whom? She had given no promise to anyone, no oath. Only Domhnall, in exchange for being a Gaelish warrior. A Cymric wishing to be a Gael, shameful. But she was also Cregicvind, and mother to the ruling Norse chief's wife. I would be a queen, Osrith said to Constantine, looking about the hall, out of the window, to the sea, and to the faint coast of Northumbria, and Cumbraland, and, further north, Stranraer, the hammer-shaped peninsula of Lower Strathclyde. I would be queen. Osrith said louder, I would rule with justice and with might. I would repel the English and the Saxons from my borders. I would unite the Cymric and the Gaels and force those who came from the sea back to it and over it. Then she turned to Constantine, and realized that she was holding Buet. All would honor me and, of my power, despair at my tyrannical brutality. Osrith had lowered her blade now. No, Constantine. Do not write me a position which I do not seek. Do not allow others to encourage this, or encourage it to be thought. It has been thought, it will be thought. Constantine told her. The Gwynedians already think of you as your queen, whether you want them to or not. Whether you give away your deeds to your daughter or not. Queen Gwyddolf. Then I will have to tell them not to. Osrith told him, forcefully. For she was not Ethelfled, she did not relish the power that leadership would give her. For Ethelfled, it was also to do with vanity, as well as power. And for a moment, her mind flicked to Seaster and her nephew. Where was Elflad now? She wondered. If you have brought me to mount a regency campaign, I will not do it. If I told you to do it, then you would do it. Constantine shot back. You are under my protection. Berwick is my land, and the people are my subjects. And you left them of your own will, he added. Don't tell me you were not a little curious to see what would be offered to you. Osrith made to pass him, but he grabbed her wrist. Same Constantine, force when reason will not allow. Constantine. She scolded, but he pulled her to him, and she dropped Buet in its suddenness. Already his cock was hard, just like the days of their youth, when fighting with her, physically, verbally, would turn him on. I would have your rule beside me, Constantine told her, his voice low. But he pushed himself away, as if some mental torture was upon him, and he was fighting something internal, some sort of struggle. And within a moment, he wore his mantle of kingship. It is your will, he told her, plainly. But you cannot change their minds with a word. They believe you are the one to lead them to freedom. Then I will talk to Sindlan, Osrith told him. I will talk to Sindlan alone, and once I have done that, I will leave to return to Gododine. She broke off, realizing what she had said. The Morrigan took a step away, pleased at her handiwork. For Osrith had, for the first time, referred to her lands of Berwick by the Brittonic, the Cymric Pictish name instead of the Saxon name of Bernicia. And just what would you say to the prince? He asked her, giving a small chuckle of derision, as was his manner when she had offended him. Act together, Osrith told Constantine. Britons, Cymric, Gaels are more of a people than the Saxons and the Angles. Pay tribute, bow the knee when he calls. Prepare for war. War? Aethelstan wants to rule every corner of this island, some places where he has never yet stepped foot. He will make it his business to step foot on it. He will turn every tribe to him, one by one, little by little, by charm, by resources, by stealth, just as Alfred did. There was silence. Then there was nothing. No words between them, nothing. Then Constantine came to her, and put his arms around her, and pulled her to him. There was no lust now, but there was something, a connection that they had never felt before. Kinship. Then, he kissed her forehead. I have prayed, every day I have prayed that you were something you could never be, Constantine told her. Osrith pulled herself free, but Constantine did not try to grab her back, and it was MacDomnall, Ui Alpin staring back at her. His father, who had welcomed Osrith into Dunnottar, let her stay, after she had defended her son from the Norse attack when she had fled Bibbenberg.